What's up, and welcome back to the Football House presented by House Enterprise. It's our weekly college football show, and we are on week 8. The crew today is Sam Basil, Cole Hughes, and myself, Will Tondo. Gentlemen, how are we doing? How's it going? I mean, this is the sports equinox week, the sports equinox day, and we got a lot of crazy sports, but how are you guys doing?
Feeling good, man. I think I've had two pretty solid weeks of college football bets. I know I wasn't on the show last week, but my card looked good. And just trying to get back in the hunt.
Yeah, on the contrary, I'm not feeling that great. I had a tough week last week, 2-6-1 overall. Probably my worst week yet this season. Just didn't make the right picks all around, and everyone on the rest of the podcast is closing the gap, and I'm feeling a little bit of the pressure, boys.
I know the gap is closed, and last week, it's cut off right now, but you can see what everyone did last week. The current standings are Cole's in first place at 55%. We got a three-way tie for 53%. Basil back from the dead, coming in with his record tied with myself and Clubfoot Jim. Gilly is at 52%. Zimmer's at 43. Gracie's at 42. So again, there's still a lot of football left, but it's starting to get tough. It's starting to get narrow. So we will see. But we got a good slate of games this week. We got a good college game day with UCLA and Oregon. We got two rivalries, which Basil will break down. But we'll kick it over to Basil first because he's coming back from the dead. Let's hear your picks, and let's start things off with you, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about this card. I guess I'll start off with my locks. My first lock is my FBS lock. I think this is really fun. Shout out to my roommate Daisy, who's a Tulane alumni, and I'm gonna go Tulane -7 over Memphis. They're 6-1 now, I believe. They're now really in contention for winning an American championship. I think that'll be something really interesting to see, and they are in the top 25 poll for the first time in like 30 years. They're so excited about being in the top 25, closing this gap for so long that they actually sent all the alumni an email about it, just, detailing, what's going on with this team, where they were the last time they were in the top 25. So, LSU is not the only big Louisiana football school, and I think it's I think Tulane, when you look at their history, they're kind of Tulane Stadium is kind of the premier college football stadium for big games in the state of Louisiana. If you look at a lot of like historic like LSU neutral site games, there are a lot of times they're played in Tulane Stadium. So I guess I'll ride the wave for one more week and go Tulane -7. FCS, Princeton money line. I've been loving Ivy League football, so far this season, and there are a lot of really, really good teams. So I'm going to have them go, take the money line for them over Harvard. One thing that's really unfortunate about the quality of these Ivy League teams is that they're not allowed to compete in FCS playoffs, which, I get that the Ivy League has the focus on academics. They don't give out scholarships, but I think it's even more of a reason for, when you have a hot team like Princeton is, like Yale is right now as well, to, have them try and compete for a national championship. I don't know why they're the only sport that they really don't let go for it, but, tough looks. All right, as for the rest of my card, I got Cincinnati -3.5. I think if anybody's going to, contend with Tulane in the American, it's going to be the, Cincinnati. They're on a roll. I've got Stanford -2.5 against Arizona State. This is one of those games where, it's kind of like you throw money on and you kind of regret it because now you kind of force yourself to watch it. Force yourself to watch 2-4 Pac-12 teams, kind of go at it. But, with Arizona State recently firing their head coach, I think, it's kind of a nightmare to bet for a team like that. So I'm going to have to go Stanford -2.5. Oklahoma +6.5. I think this one is, Oklahoma State +6.5. This is a really interesting one because Oklahoma is number 11. Texas is number 20. But Texas is the favorite by nearly a touchdown. A lot of people are riding on the Longhorns, but I think, you know, the bookmakers are, you know, doing themselves a little bit of a disservice in the fact that Oklahoma is 5-0 against the spread as an underdog since the start of last season. You know, that's a pretty tough thing to do. And Texas is 1-5 against the spread on the road in that same time span. So, you know, I think, you know, no matter what happens, no matter who wins, it's going to be a close one, and Oklahoma State's going to cover. Another spread that I feel like it should not be as close as it should be is Penn State -4.5 against Minnesota. Minnesota is not, I don't really think they're as good as we thought they were going to be in the beginning of the year. They are really good on the road. They're 5-2 against the road, against the spread on the road over the last 2 years. But, you know, I like Penn State. I think they're going to, you know, possibly, you know, contend for something big in the Big Ten this year. And this last one I think is really fun because I think earlier on in the year I was really high on Big Ten unders, which is something that we've seen in the last 3 years. But this one, TCU has single-handedly, I think, tried to, you know, kind of end that stigma. And I think they're going to do so again against Kansas State. I mean, listen to these last couple scores, you know, both home and away for TCU. 42-34, 55-24, 38-31, and 43-40. Those are, you know, aside from that game against Oklahoma that was 55-24, those are shootouts. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see against Kansas in this one. So take the over of 59 points.
It's a pretty solid card. Definitely a lot of, I mean, across the board throughout the whole team, you got a couple that you've already hit upon. And, you know, it's interesting with these. Vegas obviously knows, but the spreads are interesting. Like the Penn State spread, Kansas State, TCU, like everything. It's a little weary for me.
Yeah, definitely not saying that I'm smarter than the books or I have something that they don't, because I feel like when you say that, you're setting yourself up for some really bad beats. But what I'm saying is I'm just a little I'm interested you know, at the way that they, you know, made some of these spreads this week.
Fair enough. All right, Mr. Hughes.
Real quick before my picks, I think out of all those games, and I'll get into my picks after this, and I definitely agree with a lot what Basil said. But I think honestly the most interesting pick out of all those picks is the Harvard and Princeton game. The Ivy League battle. Like you said, it's so unfortunate that these teams don't get to compete for the playoffs. But, you know, no matter what, year in and year out, every time Ivy League teams play each other, it's always a battle. This year, both good programs. Princeton, obviously undefeated. Harvard's got one loss. The game is in Harvard. So it's definitely going to be a good matchup between the two. And I'm excited. I was going to take that as my FCS game, but I decided to stray from it because I just don't know which way it's going to go. But I like Princeton. I like what I've seen out of them. So, you know, I agree with you, Basil, and I think they'll pull it out. I think they'll get the win.
Wait, before you head to that, so why can they compete in basketball but not football?
The rules, I guess.
The jury is out on that. I've really tried to like do some digging on it. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right spots. But I really can't figure it out. You know, I know that for a long time, and still, you know, the Ivy League in all sports prides themselves on, you know, not giving scholarships to their athletes. Like all those guys are, you know, they're recruited, but they're usually walk-ons because, you know, the appeal is, you know, getting an Ivy League education. Yeah. But it's really weird because and I get it because it's like, oh, it's like, you know, midterms and finals and whatnot, but it's like you're letting your students compete in March Madness. Or, you know, they still compete in the hockey playoffs, I believe, when they get the chance. But it's weird. I don't know. Unfortunate. Maybe, you know what it is too. If you spend a lot of time looking at like the retroactive national championships all the way back to, you know, 1869 or something like that, Princeton still has the most with like 35 national championships. So maybe they're just waiting for other people to catch up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure college football started at Yale, right? That was
it started at Princeton.
Princeton.
Yep.
I knew it was one of them. Yeah, interesting stuff. Hopefully in the future they'll have that opportunity, but for now they just get to battle out in the regular season. So for me, for my picks this week, looking, like I said at the beginning of the show, had a rough week last week. Definitely looking to bounce back and, gain some more ground on you guys this week. So I'll start with my FBS lock. I'm going to go Houston -3 over Navy. Two interesting teams. Houston's had kind of a crazy year. They're 3-3 right now. They've kind of, played well in some games, have played terrible in other games, kind of been all over the place, right? And I know we've spoken about Navy multiple times on the show this year, obviously having a down year. Usually they're, one of the best academy programs when it comes to football. This year they're 2-4, not having a great year. But that being said, I mean, you can't count Navy out, right? Navy, they're a disciplined football team. They have the second least overall penalties in the entire FBS. So definitely a disciplined football team. They like to hold on to the ball. Obviously, they run that triple option. They like to chew clock. They have the most average time possession per game in the entire FBS this year. So, I mean, it's going to be, interesting to see what happens. But I just think in the end, Houston is a better football team. Every time this year that they've scored over 30 points, they've won the game. And 30 points isn't necessarily easy to come by, but I think they have the offense to do it consistently. And I think if they do get that 30 points, they're going to continue that streak and they're going to beat Navy. So I'm taking Houston to go on the road into Annapolis this week in Maryland and win by 3 for my FBS lock. As for my FCS lock, like I mentioned, I was dabbling with going with the Ivy League matchup. Ultimately decided not to, just because I don't know what's going to happen there. I think Princeton squeaks it out, but I wasn't that confident, so I decided to go with Villanova over Albany money line. So Nova, another team that's kind of been all over the place. They started out really hot coming out of the season, got a really good start. They were 2-0. Then they faced Army, and Army kind of slapped them around, an FBS team against FCS team. And since then they've been struggling. They're right now currently 10th in the Colonial. And I don't think any one of us would have expected that coming into the season out of Villanova. I thought they were going to be a dog this year and compete for that conference and, potentially even make a run in the playoffs in the FCS, but that hasn't been the case. So, another team in Albany, you got to give respect to them. Their record is 1-5, but that record does not accurately display what kind of football team this is. Out of those 5 losses, 4 of those losses have come by less than a touchdown. Their only big time loss was against Baylor to start out the season, which is, obvious. You expect the Baylor Bears to beat Albany, but the rest of their games, they've been keeping it close and they've had some tough losses. So I think this is going to be an absolute dogfight, but I think Villanova is, they're looking to bounce back after a couple tough weeks. And, I think they're going to pull it out against Albany at home. So that'll be my FCS lock. And then for my 4 picks this week, regular picks, my first one, Syracuse versus Clemson. This is going to be a hell of a game. At the beginning of the year, I was down on Clemson. They won a couple impressive games, and I said, or rather Syracuse, excuse me. I was down on Syracuse. I didn't think that they were going to do anything. They haven't really done much in the past in the football arena, and they've proved me wrong completely. And we saw a lot of teams last week in the top 25 lose their matchups. That included, USC lost to Utah, Penn State losing to Michigan, Alabama falling to Tennessee. Well, I think the trend continues this week. I'm not only going to take Syracuse plus 13.5, but I honestly think that they might even win this game against Clemson, shock the entire country. I know it's crazy. I know you guys are probably going to be like, well, you're out of your mind, but I think that Syracuse deserves the respect. Clemson has honestly, they haven't impressed me much this year. I mean, yeah, they're undefeated, but they got away with one against Wake Forest a couple weeks ago in overtime. They barely got by them. Last week they played FSU. They only won by a touchdown. They haven't looked great. So, I mean, I think Syracuse, this is their opportunity to shock the world. And I think you go into Clemson and you try to make the most of that opportunity and try and take advantage of it. So I'm rooting for the Orange this week, big time, the underdogs, and hopefully they can pull out the win. So going to take Syracuse plus 13.5 in that game. Moving on, just to bounce off what Basil said, OK State versus Texas, another, really good game between the Big 12. I know Texas, interesting team. They obviously had that big win against their rival, Oklahoma, in the Red River Showdown a couple weeks ago. They kind of came back down to earth last week against Iowa State. OK State's been really hot. Their offense has looked unbelievable. They lost a heartbreaker against a really good TCU team last week in overtime. When it comes down to it, I'm just a really big fan of Spencer Sanders, the quarterback for the Cowboys. Texas, they've had some impressive wins. They've played well. I think the Alabama game showed us a lot. When they played Oklahoma showed us a lot. But I think they haven't totally convinced me yet. Maybe if they beat OK State this week, I'll change my mind, but I'm going to roll with the Cowboys at home. I'm just going to go money line. I think OK State wins that game. My third pick is going to be Penn State, Minnesota. Again, like Basil. Minnesota, they started out pretty well. They were doing all right, and the last two weeks they've been struggling a little bit, especially within the conference. They lost to Purdue a couple weeks ago, which we've spoken about Purdue. They're an all right team. They suffered that loss, and then last week they lose again to Illinois back to back. Yes, Penn State lost to Michigan last week in a pretty decisive fashion, but I think Penn State is, looking to bounce back this week. It's at the end of the day, two great programs in the Big Ten. I'm a big fan of both coaches. I love PJ Fleck at Minnesota. I think he's done a great job there. And James Franklin at Penn State, he walked into kind of a crappy situation when he first got there, and he's done, an overall pretty good job. Keeping that program afloat. I would like to see Penn State try to take it to the next level and be a powerhouse in the Big Ten once again, competing with Michigan and Ohio State. But, I don't know. We'll see. Minnesota's quarterback, Tanner Morgan, we don't know if he's going to play this week. That could be a huge X factor. If he doesn't play, I take the Nittany Lions to win this game in decisive fashion. Him and Sean Clifford, the quarterback of Penn State, they actually go way back. I was reading an article earlier today. They've been playing each other since the 6th grade. So there's a lot of history there. Hopefully Tanner Morgan gets to suit up. It'll make it a little bit more competitive, but I'm going to take Penn State -4 against Minnesota. And then my fourth and final pick for this week is number 21, Cincy against SMU -3.5. Cincy, obviously a great year last year, had an amazing year, lost a lot of guys to the NFL draft. We've spoken about this. Week 1, they came out this year. They lost to Arkansas. Everyone was all up in arms. Oh, it's over. It was a fluke. They're not going to do anything this year. Well, guess what? Since then, they haven't looked back. They haven't lost a game. So, I think there's a reason why Cincy got an invitation to the Big 12 in the future years and SMU didn't. And SMU is also in Texas, so they definitely could have. It's just because Cincy's a better program overall. And I think that's going to be evident this week when they play SMU. So I'm going to take Cincy -3.5. And those are going to be my picks for this week.
I don't think your Clemson pick is crazy. I really don't.
I love it.
I think Syracuse does deserve some respect on their name. And Clemson still has a lot to prove. What are they currently sitting at? 5, 6?
They're at 5, I believe.
So, the way teams are shuffling up on top, you need these wins to prove to everyone that you deserve to be up here. But so does Syracuse.
Yeah, look, it's a big game, and Clemson last year, like they didn't have a great year, right? They kind of fell off last year. So it's also a statement game for them to try and make a statement as that fifth team to sneak into the college football playoff. I mean, obviously they have to win this game if they want to be in the discussion, but I feel like they have to win it in a big fashion, right? But I don't know. I just something about Syracuse. I doubted them at the beginning of the year, like I said, and they've proved me wrong. So you know what? I'm hopping on the bandwagon. I'm rooting for them to pull off the major upset, and let's see how far they can go. I mean, they're right now coming into this week, they're ranked number 14. Like if they beat Clemson, that's a big jump, and who knows what happens.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I will ride with my picks right now. Total eye test this week. I felt, there was a lot of good games to bet on, and I'll probably, bet on a lot of the plays that you guys already mentioned. But this ones were they just felt right. So, well, the first one did my FCS lock, URI money line. I was going to do Bryant, but they bit me hard last week. So I'm going to swing my allegiance to the different team in Rhode Island because that was just brutal. My FBS lock, though, UNLV plus 27 against Notre Dame. I just think it's too high. Notre Dame is 2-4 against the spread compared to UNLV's 5-2. I'm not a big believer in Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Cole.
No.
It just, I think 27 is way too high of a spread for this game. So that'll be my lock. I got Rutgers -3 over Indiana just because I've been riding with the Scarlet Knights. I got TCU -3.5 against Kansas State. I think that one could go either way. I'm just going to ride with the higher seeded team for this one. I agree with your picks on Houston, Cole. And the pick I do like the most, though, is Purdue plus 2.5 over Wisconsin. Purdue's been a power. Like, it's not a crazy Boilermaker team, but I do think that they have the advantage over the Badgers. So I just like the plus money spread there. So those are my picks, quick and easy. And we'll see.
Yeah, I like the Purdue pick. I think I've said this multiple times on the show this year. Coming into the year, I had huge expectations for Purdue. Right? They haven't really lived up to it, but they haven't done terrible. So I mean, Wisconsin has been kind of a disappointment. So I could see Purdue squeaking that one out. And as for Notre Dame, yes, I have the hat on. I haven't totally given up on them yet, even though I probably should, but I just can't find it in me to do it quite yet.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, before we get to game of the week in the rivalry, I'm just curious, looking at like the top 25 poll right now, is there a chance Alabama climbs back up to the top 4?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, look at Clemson's ahead of them, right? We just spoke about that game with Syracuse. If that's an upset that happens, they automatically jump, right? Tennessee, I think, has a no name this week. They're playing some FCS school, I believe. So they shouldn't be an issue this week, but they still have Georgia on their schedule, right? And that's going to be a make or break game for Tennessee. I mean, if Tennessee beats Georgia and Alabama in the same year and are still undefeated after those 2 games, they pretty much guarantee their spot in the college football playoff. But if Tennessee loses to Georgia, I could see Alabama hopping back into the mix. I mean, Georgia has Florida this week. I think they beat them. At the end of the day, it might be a close game, but I think they ultimately win the game at home. So I don't think they move necessarily this week, but then the week after, they have that Tennessee game. So, I mean, there's definitely possibilities for Bama to move back up. I don't know if it's necessarily this week to move into the top 4, but, there's plenty of opportunities. And then you have Ohio State at number 2. They have Iowa at home this week. They'll probably win that game, but then they have Penn State the following week. So there's definitely plenty of matchups where there are avenues for Alabama to sneak back in. And we all know from years past, if Alabama, it doesn't matter what their rank is, 1 through 4, if they end up in the college football playoff, they're probably going to make a run, right? And that's what Nick Saban is preaching inside that locker room. It does not matter what our ranking is. Let's do what we got to do. Take it week by week. We control our own destiny. We can't worry about what other teams are doing. We have to go out there and take care of business. If they do that for the rest of the season, I mean, one of these top 5 teams or a couple of these top 5 teams are ultimately going to fall at some point, which allows them the opportunity to potentially get back in. And, once they get in, anything can happen in the playoffs, as we know. Basil, I think you're on mute.
I am on mute. I did that at work like twice today, and I'm doing it tonight on the pod. But what I was saying was the way you broke it down was definitely from like a playoff committee standpoint, which I think was probably the perfect way to do it.
Right.
But I think there's another path that not only could get Alabama back into the playoff, but we could see an Alabama-Tennessee rematch before everything is even set, before the playoff committee even picks the final 4 teams, because obviously they're in 2 different divisions in the SEC, and if you look at the standings right now, Alabama is a half game back of Ole Miss, and right now, in terms of teams that are in Alabama's division remaining on their schedule, you've got Mississippi State, LSU, Ole Miss, and then the Iron Bowl with Auburn. So if Alabama beats, those are all teams that are very good this year, maybe except for Auburn. But all teams that are pretty good and that Alabama can beat. So as long as they win those 4 games and Tennessee beats Georgia, we're probably going to have an Alabama-Tennessee SEC title game. That the only thing that really hinges on that happening or not is this Tennessee-Georgia game.
Right.
So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It is definitely possible that could happen. And I would love, based on the game last week, right, I would love to have a rematch between those two in the SEC championship game, right? I mean, obviously we spoke about it last week. That rivalry is one of the best in college football. They have that tradition, the 3rd Saturday in October. But just the level of play last week and the high scoring game and the fireworks that we got to experience in that game, it was fun to watch. And, you don't get that a lot with Alabama because year in and year out, they dominate the SEC. But, it's nice to see Tennessee, kind of a team that came out of nowhere this year to challenge them, because normally if there's going to be one team that challenges them, it's Georgia in the past couple of years. So I would love to see a rematch there. I think, another very enticing game is going to be the Alabama-Ole Miss game. If Ole Miss is still undefeated there and, Alabama has to win that game. If they lose that game and they fall to two losses, then, they're definitely out. They're not making the playoffs. And then it begs the question that you might have an Ole Miss Tennessee SEC championship game, which would be absolutely wild because neither of those teams have been in the SEC championship in how many years,
Yeah. Told you guys, divisions are important. Divisions matter. I think the SEC is a perfect example of it. An 18 playoff?
I said what? I said once we have the expanded playoffs, it'll be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's head to our rivalries.
Yeah, so I definitely want to start off with this one because I definitely want to start off with Kent State and Akron, because not only is this a kind of an interesting game, but I was doing some research on the rivalry, and it might be like the coolest one that we've done so far, both in the etymology and how it's conducted and pretty much just everything. So first off, let me talk about, why this is called the Wagon Wheel. And this is according to the wagonwheelchallenge.com, which is a website that's maintained by both schools' athletic departments. So according to legend, the Wagon Wheel Trophy traces its beginnings to the spring of 1870, when Akron industrialist John R. Bucktel set out for the town of Kent in search of a site to establish a college. So in the trail and the muddy fields, his wagon lost a wheel. And he had to, continue surveying and working on whatever project he was working on, with a 3-wheeled wagon. 32 years later, that was some quick math there. This wagon wheel was unearthed from the ground when people were trying to build a pipeline along the Western Reserve Trail. So now this trophy is the actual wagon wheel. It's kind of been gilded and restored to not only be the trophy for the football game, but to be the trophy for the winner of a combined series of 8 different sports across 14 different disciplines. And so right now on the website, it's got listed the following sports that are part of this wagon wheel challenge: baseball, men's and women's basketball, women's cross country, football, women's golf, women's lacrosse, women's soccer, softball, indoor track and field, outdoor track and field, and volleyball. So basically, across those 14 sports, the way that this rivalry works is if you beat the other school in a game, you get 1 point. If you play each other twice, which that happens a lot throughout the year, you get half a point. So if you're Kent State and you beat Akron at home and you lose to Akron in Akron, you each get half a point. And so the first team to win at least 7.5 points across the rivalry the entire year is the winner of the wagon wheel. So this football game, although it's considered, probably the marquee matchup of the entire rivalry, is only the 4th stop out of 14 in this matchup that spans the entire school year. Right now, if you're curious for what the current standings are, Kent State won the first women's soccer game, so they've got a point, and then they got a half a point by winning a women's volleyball match, and then Akron got a half a point by winning another women's volleyball match. So right now, Kent State has a 1.5 to 1 lead on this trophy. So if they win this football game, they can extend that to 2.5 to a half, or it ties up at 1.5 points apiece. In terms of how this game is going to go, if I may give my pick first, this game is gonna suck. This football game, I think is probably, in terms of exposure, is probably the biggest matchup on the wagon wheel slate. But in terms of quality, it might be the worst this year. Let me just pull up my notes here real quick. Akron is a bad team. They've lost, 6 of their last 7 games, and they're a terrible team on the road. Their offense is not good. They fail to put up 20 points a game. And Kent State, while I think they're the better team and they have the home field advantage, also is not a very good offense. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at something like a 17-10 game, or maybe even like a 14-3 kind of game. So that's why for my pick, I'm going to go Kent State money line and Akron plus 18.5, because they're gonna cover that 18.5, not by their own merit, but just by Kent State's offensive inadequacy. And the wagon wheel will remain in Kent State for a little bit.
Well, first off, I appreciate your historic knowledge on the wagon wheel. I love all of your rivalry stuff, so thank you for always doing it. And secondly, I'm glad we did 2 rivalries, because I agree these 2 teams are buns. And I also have the same pick, Kent State money line, just because they're the home team, and Akron plus 18.5, because if you ain't covering 20 against a shit team and you're a shit team yourself, you shouldn't even be playing.
Yeah. Just because a trophy is involved does not mean the game is going to be good. Looking at Super Bowl, what was it, like 54 as well, between the fucking Pats and the Rams.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll take this. We'll take the win, though.
Yeah, exactly. You still got a trophy, so
we'll take the wagon wheel.
No, hey, honestly, before this week, I didn't even know that this was a rivalry. So thank you to Basil for obviously doing this research week in and week out, because, every week, even if you do know about the rivalry, you're pulling out all these fun facts that are awesome and just teaching us more about college football and college sports as a whole. So I love that we're doing this. I think it's really cool that they don't just base it off of the football game, but across all sports, different genders. It's awesome. And like you said, I mean, it's only the 4th kind of competition this year throughout the whole season, of sports throughout, fall, winter, spring, whatever, right? So it kind of sets the tone. Like, does Kent State build an early lead and then Akron's kind of digging themselves out of the hole the rest of the year, or can they bring it back to make it more equal, and then they're just battling it out through the spring, which is awesome. I really love it. As much as an awful game it's going to be, that's what makes it cool. But yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I mean, two tough teams in the MAC matchup this week, having rough years. I mean, 2-5 on Kent State's part, 1-6 on Akron's part. I will say for Kent State, they have had some tough opponents that they've played this year. I mean, they've had to play Oklahoma, they've had to play Washington, they've played Georgia, and they've played a 5-2 team, Toledo, right? So those are some tough games, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're still two terrible teams. Their turnover ratios are both awful. Akron -5 and Kent State -4, so turning the ball over a lot, just not playing great football. But, I will say Kent State, as like you said, Basil, their offense hasn't been great. They haven't been putting up that many points, but they have actually, which surprised me, they're averaging 430 yards a game on offense. So even though they're not putting up points, they're still averaging a lot of yards. And I think that will benefit them this week against Akron at home. And, look, I do think it'll probably be another low-scoring game, but I'm going to take Kent State as well, jump on you guys' picks, and take them to win the game and get the wagon wheel in that rivalry.
How much do you think you get paid for all of those games that they had to play?
Who knows?
They're collecting. I mean, to take a beating from, what'd you say, Oklahoma State, Washington, and Georgia?
The Sooners, Washington, Georgia, yeah.
Damn.
I know.
That's brutal.
Hey, their athletic department must be nice. They must have some good facilities because they're definitely getting the cash flow.
I guess so.
This rivalry will be good in like 5 months during the MAC tournament, because last year I was watching the MAC tournament and there was some crazy games. Like Akron versus who was it? Akron Toledo was like one of the best like conference tournament games I watched like all last season. So if you're a fan of one of these two teams and you're dreading watching this football game, just know it gets better.
Can only go up.
Yeah. And for our second rivalry.
Yeah, so this is another historic rivalry, probably a bit more historic on the national scene. Less so for their etymology. They have a lot less fun naming history as compared to Kent State and Akron, but this one's the Magnolia Bowl between LSU and Ole Miss, and it's called the Magnolia Bowl because for all you state flower or state bird enthusiasts, Louisiana and Mississippi have the same state flower, which is the magnolia. Very pretty southern flower. But I think what the real appeal to this one is the history, the major moments that we've seen in these games. I mean, obviously in 1959, you got Cannon's Halloween Run. Last year, you saw Ole Miss and Matt Corral take it against LSU on the same day that they retired Eli Manning's jersey. In 2011, you saw Ole Miss get coached by a guy named Houston Nutt. That's sick. And so, depending, where these two teams are right now, LSU's in a bit of a weird year. They've kind of fallen out of the top 25, made their way back up. Ole Miss is, standing strong right in the middle of the rankings, looking to crack the top 10. I think this is going to be a very fun, very good game. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good one. As for my picks, I think, it's going to be tough. I think I might have to go Ole Miss in this one. They're the underdogs here, but I mean, they're just a much better team. They're gonna be in Death Valley, so that is tough. But I think with new coach Brian Kelly, I don't think LSU. They're good. They're there to be good on a national stage, but this is like the toughest SEC to be a first year head coach in, and in a big rivalry, I think I'm gonna have to take Ole Miss plus 2.5 and the money line on this one.
Yeah, I'm rolling with you. I mean, I spoke last week as I spit everywhere, excuse me. I spoke last week about Ole Miss and how they've been really impressive. I've been rolling with them a lot this year. They've been averaging over 40 points a game. They've looked really good. They're obviously number 7 in the country right now for good reason, right? And we spoke earlier about kind of the situation where the SEC standings are and where they stand right now. They're number 1 in the SEC West over Alabama, right? So, I mean, every game from here on out is crucial to them. They pretty much have to win out at this point if they want to get into the SEC championship and, be in the discussion for the college football playoff. But you know what? I like their chances. I like them to make a run. I mean, obviously they have that game against Alabama in a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. But as for this week, I think they do upset LSU. I know that they're the underdog, but I think they go into Death Valley. And look, Death Valley, obviously we know is one of the hardest places to play in college football. It's one of the most electric atmospheres. It's very tough to go in there as an opposing team and, perform well. But, I'm rolling with Lane Kiffin. I love the guy. I think he's awesome. If I was a college recruit in today's age that was exceptionally talented in the sport of football, I would consider playing for the guy because he's just a player's coach. He is a genius on the offensive side of the ball. His father, Monty Kiffin, was obviously a genius on the defensive side of the ball, a big kind of creator of the Tampa 2 defense. Just a very smart, intelligent football family that has a lot of legacy. And, I trust Lane Kiffin and, his coaching staff to lead the Rebels to a victory.
I have the same. I have Ole Miss plus 2.5 and the money line. I mean, on paper, Ole Miss is a better team. The one thing that's concerning with me is Ole Miss is like 1-4-2 against the spread, whereas LSU is 5-1-1. That was like kind of a deterrent when I was like picking this. However, I'm like, Ole Miss is the better team. We understood. We've already talked about how playing in Death Valley and stuff. I don't want to talk myself out of this, but like the only game Ole Miss like really impressed me was against when they upset Kentucky. Other than that, it's like their opponents have been kind of It's like they're 7-0 for a reason because it's like they had an easier schedule. But I'm not going to talk myself out of it because I've already locked it in. I'm riding with you guys. Got to ride with the team. Ole Miss money line and covering the spread.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Look, their schedule hasn't been the hardest, right? But I always just go back to look at their offensive production. Like they have been putting up absolutely points consistently every week, week in, week out, even against SEC teams. And that's not an easy task, right? So, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think
it's going to be a good game.
I think it's going to be a battle. I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight. They're going to be throwing haymakers at each other all game. It's going to be a battle in the trenches, and it might even come down to who can make the last stop, right? We'll see what happens. But I just think in the end, I think, like you said, Will, that Ole Miss is just a better team on paper, and I think they are a better team on the field as well. I think they're just more well-rounded. I think they're just going to perform better in the end and get the win.
Yeah, I honestly think the biggest difference maker is just like the Death Valley crowd. If like we're really looking at it, because if you look at just player to player matchups, Ole Miss has them beat in almost every single category, and on the coaching staff. Like I just but again, it's Death Valley, so you never know.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of the hardest. If not the hardest place to play in all of college football, it's definitely up there. And the crowd is going to be absolutely bumping. It's going to be electric. Thankfully, it's not a game under the lights, because under the lights in Death Valley, I might actually have.
Yeah.
Because that place at night just turns into a whole different arena. But they're playing at 3:30. I think the Magnolia battle just goes to the Rebels this year.
Do it for Coach Nutt,
That's right.
And then we got a pretty decent college game day, a little Pac-12 matchup, UCLA and Oregon. again, for many, it's kind of like like in terms of like we're talking Pac-12 for college game day, but I think it'll be a good matchup, especially because both teams are ranked. So for me, I was teetering back and forth with this because I'm not a big Bo Nix guy and I'm not a big Oregon guy. They bit me in the past before. And UCLA, like, they truly deserve to be number 9 right now. I mean, upsetting Washington and Utah back-to-back weeks, the momentum's high. The momentum is high. However, we've seen in the past of these teams, just the past couple weeks, college game day rolls around, the excitement's getting there, a lot of eyes on you. So I think UCLA covers, but I'm going to take Oregon money line.
Yeah, I have the same thing, Will. I mean, I really went back and forth, and like you guys said, this is awesome that game day is going out to a Pac-12 game. These two teams have been really impressive. We talk so much about the SEC and the Big Ten and all these teams moving to those conferences, but look, the Pac-12 has proven they still have some big dogs that are capable of being top-notch teams, and they're going to put out a good product. So I think it's good for the overall game that, these teams are performing so well this year, and that, we get game day in Eugene, Oregon, this week. But yeah, these teams, both electric offenses. I was doing a little research earlier. Both teams have scored 40 points or more in every one of their games except for one each. So putting up a lot of points. I love DTR from UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's been unbelievable. He's been the catalyst for, UCLA being undefeated. They've really stepped it up a notch and have been impressive. And I wanted to pick them very badly this week. I really did. But in the end, I just think Oregon at home, I think they're gonna get it. They lost to Georgia early on in the year, pretty embarrassing, by a big margin. But since then, they've been really hot, just as hot as UCLA. And, like you said, Will, UCLA is getting a lot of, I think, national coverage because of those wins against Washington and Utah. But, I think, you got to look out for Oregon, too. They're a really good team. I think it's going to be an absolute shootout. Like I said, both these teams score a lot of points. I'm going to take Oregon in a very close game at home to beat the Bruins 45-42.
Yeah, Cole, I mean, I think you said exactly what I was going to say about, kind of, how we, maybe, as a podcast, but even as like a football watching, nation, you lose to Georgia in week 1 really badly, and everyone forgets about you. They
Right.
put you on the same plane as like a Marshall or somebody, that gets scheduled week 1.
Marshall beat Notre Dame this year, so
yeah. Well, okay, yeah. So I mean, yeah, anything could happen. Sorry to open that wound again.
It's all good.
But I mean, the ground game too that Oregon has been cooking up right now. Both with their running backs and with Bo Nix. I mean, he is so mobile and he is so good. As a dual threat quarterback. That while I do think it will be a shootout, I think that will be the difference maker because they have such a huge advantage in that, area over UCLA. So that's why I've got Oregon to win it, to cover 6 points, and I'm gonna take it like 35-28.
Yeah, and it's funny, Basil, that you mentioned Bo Nix because a lot of people forget, right? He was at Auburn before he went to Oregon, right? And
he was great at Auburn,
transfer, right? So he's played in these huge games before, like SEC matchups, Iron Bowl against Alabama, the biggest stage that you could think of, he's done it, right? So UCLA coming into Oregon this week is nothing to him. So, I'm expecting a big week out of him. He's obviously a veteran, and, I expect him to be composed and to lead that Oregon Ducks offense to, a ton of points. And, hopefully they can get the win, but it should be a great game. Like I said, really glad the game day is going there. Love that it's going out west. I know if Gracie was here, she'd say no one cares about Pac-12 football, but hey, I am not in that group. I love it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what her pick was for this. So she had Oregon money line. She's staying away from the spread. And again, the home team,
tough.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But any other games that stick out to you this week? Just looking in the top 25. I mean, Tennessee having Tennessee Martin like smack dab in the middle of the season is kind of just like a letdown after beating Alabama too. It's like I hope they don't like, hit the brakes on that one and just like not care.
Yeah, and
But-
it could hurt them too because
Yeah.
like even if they do come out this week and blow them out, which they probably will, right? Say they put up 60, 70 points on this team. Does that hurt them for the week after against Georgia? I don't know.
I don't think
They have-
so.
They have Georgia
I
right
think-
now.
You think it's a
Oh, sorry.
confidence booster, or do you think?
I mean,
what's your take on
if they
that?
smoke them, it's like okay, yeah, just like forget about it and move on. But yeah, I mean, if they kind of have to sweat it out a little bit, that'll be a tough look for them. But I mean, I just hate when schools do this. Like if you're gonna schedule like a smaller school, do it weeks 1 through 3. Like I wish they just like made a rule about that because there was one year where Alabama I think played the Citadel in like week 10 or something like that. They played them so late in the season, like already at the time where it was like the committee was coming out with their rankings, and it's like Alabama's got the Citadel scheduled right now. Like, are you kidding me? And I think they still made it, but it's like, what are you doing?
A throwaway game.
Yeah, it's like
But
not even fun to watch.
Yeah, speaking of Alabama, they have obviously the big win against Mississippi State. They're currently 21-point favorites, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, look, after the loss last week, I mean, they know the position they're in. Like I said, Saban's going to be preaching. It's their road to run at this point, and they're back at home in Tuscaloosa. It might be ugly for Mississippi State this week, I think, because I think Bama's just going to be pissed off, and they're going to want to come back and make a statement and say, you know what, yeah, Tennessee beat us last week, but they got away with one, and we're coming back, and we'll see you later on in the year.
I want to see like how many times in like Nick Saban's career he's had two losses or more.
At Alabama or just in general?
Alabama specifically.
I wonder if he's even lost 2 games in a row at Bama. Has he?
Probably in a row, probably not. I mean,
maybe 1 year or something like that. But
so last year they were 13-2.
So they lost to Georgia in the championship, and then they lost to someone during the regular season. Well, who was it? A&M or was it Mississippi State?
Last year,
Yeah,
A&M.
A&M.
2019 he was 11-2. And then besides that, the last time was 2013 and 2014.
Crazy.
2010 he was 10-3.
But did not lose. He did not lose 3 games in a row that year. Lost the
No,
Iron
not-
Bowl that year, though.
Yeah, not in a
That
row.
was the Auburn game, right?
Yep. Not the kick 6.
No,
That
yeah.
was 2013.
But I mean, 184-26 record at Alabama is just insane.
Hey, that's why he's getting paid $10 million a year for the next 10 years.
He's got it made.
College football coach.
It's crazy
That's
because
nice.
I was actually reading about him a couple days ago, and right before he took the Alabama job, he was the coach of the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And I always knew that he had like a little bit of time in the NFL, and I thought before I did any reading into it, I thought it was like almost kind of like an Urban Meyer situation, like great coach, national championship winning coach, and then you move on to the NFL, and then you can't really handle the big stage, and you go back to college, and you're successful again. That wasn't really the case. Like his start at Miami wasn't that great, but it was about to be pretty good. And then he got the call for the Alabama job, and then had to like go through all these hoops and jump through all these hoops to get out of the Dolphins contract. So it's a very interesting what if Nick Saban stayed in Miami and stayed an NFL coach. But I mean, obviously he's not thinking about that.
Supposedly, I think one of the well-known rumors is that year he was in Miami, that 1 year when he became the head coach, that was the year that Drew Brees left the Chargers and ended up going to New Orleans. and there were a lot of rumors about him going to Miami. Imagine if Nick Saban had Drew Brees in Miami.
Yeah,
Who knows what would have happened?
that's crazy.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason, I guess, but worked out for him.
But again, would Drew Brees be the guy he was in Miami compared to the Saints?
Who knows, right?
Who knows?
He's like, he wasn't like, he got replaced in San Diego by Phillip Rivers. So it's like,
and Drew Brees had Sean Payton as a coach in New Orleans, right? One of the best coaches there is, right? So who knows? You don't know. It's all hearsay.
It's been on my list for a while now of like, I've been wanting to do like the biggest what ifs in sports, and like I brainstormed this. This was like a year ago, and one of them was if Nick Saban never left, like what the world would look like. Because it's like Alabama wouldn't be this head honcho.
No.
It's still be a good school. Like, it's still be good.
I mean,
it's still be good, but it's like, would they have that many titles?
No, absolutely not. I mean, Alabama back in the day was obviously a powerhouse with Bear Bryant, right? And then there was a long time where they were just like, they were mediocre, right? In the SEC, they weren't a powerhouse. Maybe they had a year here and there where they competed, but overall, they weren't the powerhouse that we know them as today. And he's definitely, turned that program into what it is. And it's a fact because he won one at LSU too. He's a winner in the college game. It's just, he's one of the best. He is the best college football coach ever lived.
Guy's a stud. So hopefully we're studs this week, winning some games. Got to catch up to Cole at that top of the leaderboard. So we'll see what happens.
Got to build back that lead, baby.
But that is week 8 of the Football House. We got Sam, myself. We're bringing you winners. We're bringing you heat, and we'll catch you next week.